else. All right, so the SEC announcing today about their revenue sharing. They will anticipate distributing as much as $15 million annually in revenue sharing to football players, and that's about $250 million as a league. Expect rosters the size of about 105 and believe the NIL collective will remain as a recruiting sweetener. So your thoughts about, I wasn't they, can't you go up to like 22, or was 22 the ceiling, or what?
That was what they thought the suggested thing was going to be, and they're expecting to do 15. Some schools said they were going to do the full, we'll do the full, cap on it, whatever it winds up being. But it's still, the whole idea that they thought that this was going to get rid of collectives was just whoever had that idea at the NCAA was just dumb. Just dumb. Because there still has to be okay, you're going to make, essentially, if you're getting rid of collectives, even though they're not this, how are you going to stop advertising agencies? That's basically what they pretend to be in some regards and actually are in other regards. But yeah, they say about $15 million per school. All right. Well, some schools might do more, some schools might do less. They just have to share the revenue. And so we'll see. I mean, they've got the SEC's got a lot more to distribute because they've got a bigger television revenue than everybody but the Big Ten. So, there's 16 teams, 15 million. Maybe it gets up to 20. Who knows?
I think the most notable thing is 105 roster limit. I think that's obviously the most interesting thing, not the $15 million tag that'll fluctuate. And so that's great news for guys who otherwise would have been walk-ons. Going to be very interesting to see if that means some recruits rotting on rosters for a year or two, because they now have the financial flexibility to throw more on the roster as far as scholarship players go. But ultimately, when you think about, Georgia and Texas A&M and Ole Miss and those schools are going to hoard all these players. Well, they got to play, right? Mm-hmm. They still have to play at some point in time. So, yeah, I guess if you want to go make a buck and never see the field, then go to a school that's going to pay out 105 scholarships and, good luck breaking the starting lineup. But I think you're still going to see the talent spread around a bit because guys want to play. You're not in it for the quick buck. You're in it for the big money down the road. And that's not in the cards for everybody. But even if it's not, you still want to play. You don't want to just sit back and collect a check. I think 99% of guys don't want to do that. So that'll be interesting. I mean, again, best news you could have for walk-ons, if anything else. But certainly I think if you're lower-level schools, you start wondering, how much of the talent starts to get hoarded away because now you got a full-blown 20 extra, scholarship players on a roster. But I guess we need to see more of the details on that. The $15 million, that tag, that seems like it's a fluctuating number that is not really official in any capacity yet, although it's the rumored number. And so I don't really have much thought on that. I don't get really interested in the financial breakdowns of how the teams are going to be paid for. But it says right there that if there was a stop sign, it gets blown right past because of the recruiting sweetener. I like how we're referring to that, dressing that up and making it all sugary sweet.
Like sweet and low.
Instead of calling it what it is, which is, paying players. Even though we gasp when we hear it in some other way, like Dave Aranda last week, oh, you can't, and here we are, recruiting sweetener. Let's just call it something nice and fluffy and pretend that it's not, the stuff that we used to be afraid to talk about. But yeah, that's obviously recruiting sweetener going to be used to tilt the scales in favor of certain schools that want to give more and can give more and use more to get who they want to get. So that's not changing anytime soon. But it's very interesting in that 105 is a huge change from the 85 that we've been so accustomed to for such a long time now.
All right, so there we are with that then. Mike Elko, there's a couple of back-to-back here. I honestly believe, and I know what they've been able to do since the late 90s, and especially when Florida and LSU and then Alabama started winning national titles in the 2000s. But I actually believe that the SEC truly believes that nobody else should be in the college football playoff but their teams. We heard what Greg Sankey said, and then he started barking again at Florida State, a shot at Florida State when he brought up Georgia. Mike Elko, A&M's head football coach, spending 4 years in this conference, I felt more teams were deserving of making the playoff. This conference has clearly established itself as the premier conference. No one's arguing with that. It deserves more access. I think you'll see something similar. Here's my question, though. They've had most of the teams.
Yeah.
They had 2 last year that created the problem.
They're just politicking for the upcoming playoff.
I know, but it's as if do they think that we're all just dumb?
Do you not see 97% of the college football media follow along and lap them up at every turn that they possibly can? That's who they're talking to.
They also win national titles, a bunch of them. Yeah. Imagine if 98 Kansas State, 04 or 8 or 9 Texas and Oklahoma. If, for example, TCU or Baylor in 14, Oklahoma in any of those other recent ones, Texas last year, if let's say 2 or 3 of those opportunities had been national titles, would that have changed anything at all?
Yeah, it would have. That would have, because it would have made the Big 12 way more marketable.
Especially if it had been non-Texas or Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, look, you can take – I'll even, like Georgia and LSU. I mean, Georgia's the new juggernaut, but you know, they were always the good.
They were like Clemson for a while.
Yeah, they were good but not great. Mark Richt had them up there, but they weren't winning anything of note. Now Kirby Smart's taking them into the stratosphere, but you know, you take Alabama out of it, then you also still have Florida and Auburn and all these other, like LSU. So Alabama has the lion's share of them, but everybody else has, you got multiple teams with multiple ones, and you've got Tennessee and Auburn that have them in the last 30 years. So those things are a big deal. So if the Big 12 had flipped some of those, yeah, absolutely it would be different, because they would be able to say the same thing about themselves. The thing the SEC has is nobody else can say that about themselves. They can. They've got all these titles, and to you saying, like, why do they want more? Like, I mean, why does Amazon.com keep growing? Jeff Bezos could stop tomorrow and literally do nothing and be, fined for a millennia. If he finds a way to live forever, he'll never run out of money. So the SEC, the same way, they're always going to want more.
I don't think this is really all that complicated. Yeah. If you're the third best team in the SEC that otherwise wasn't getting into a playoff, but now you can, you're going to say what you can to get in there, and you're probably safe. But if you're that fifth team, yeah, you're jockeying. If you're A&M, you're the fifth best team in the SEC in a 12-team playoff era. You're going to throw your weight on the table and say, well, we're from the SEC, and we play the best football, and they're politicking. That's all they're doing. They're just setting it up for trying to get as much of the field as possible, jockeying for spots. I don't think they're going to have to jockey too much to get their initial handful, but beyond that, if you're splitting hairs between the fifth, sixth best team in the SEC and the third best team in the Big 12 or the ACC, I bet you that's a real conversation, and the whole strength of the SEC gets thrown around as a reason why they would be deserving of having a fifth team, a sixth team, as opposed to another conference having even a second or a third team. We're going to hear that moving. We're already hearing it. Here's Mike Elko saying what every other coach believes, but every other coach in every other league would feel the same way if the shoe was on the other foot, and they'll be saying the same things about the strength of their conferences when it comes time to split hairs and pick who gets in the field. But, yeah, they're just towing the company line and saying what is the best for the conference, which is we're the best, we deserve the most, and if we don't get the most and we're not considered the best, then that other side who's saying that is wrong, because we are clearly the best and we deserve the most. And they're just reinforcing that, and so when we get 5 of the 12 from the SEC come December, don't be surprised by that. And if it's 6 somehow, don't be surprised by that, because they're already, lubing it up to be that way in just terms of the conversation around their strength and why they deserve the most. So
and Nick Saban today talking about even 2022 when TCU beat Michigan, and then they got thumped and hammered and humiliated by Georgia. Nick Saban on the SEC network last night, I still have a little pet peeve about we didn't get in 22 and TCU did. Kansas State beat them, and we beat Kansas State by 25 or 30 points in a bowl game. Who had the better team? So, well, but anyway.
When did that bowl game happen, before or after that decision? Happened after that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't the same. You didn't both beat them before. You didn't beat them before it was decided. You beat them after it was decided. So I don't see that as being the same thing.
How many games did you lose, Nick, that year? How many? You ever know? How many games they lost?
1.
They lost 2 games.
2.
How many games did TCU lose?
1.
1 game.
Yep.
So again,
no.
you're shouldn't have lost to Tennessee or LSU. And I know that they kept saying by a combined 4 points. Well, could have been by a combined 2. Doesn't matter. You lost the games. TCU lost a thriller in the conference championship game in overtime to Kansas State after they'd run through 12-0, something that you did not do and didn't play in the conference title game that year, if I'm right, Garrett.
Yep.
Right? They didn't play in the conference title game. TCU did. So, yeah, no, Alabama wasn't there. And the transitive property also does not work. It's not an equal method. So, okay, yes, Kansas State beat TCU that day. You drilled Kansas State when you played them a month later when, a lot of things could have happened. So let me just say the transitive property, Alabama loses to Texas earlier last year with Jalen Milroe having his worst game. And then some injuries and all that. And then all those guys are back later, and they beat a team that beat Texas. Does that mean that they could just beat Texas again? No. They lost to Texas when they played them. It's not equal. There's different things. So would you say, yeah, but we didn't have our quarterback in that one? Or we didn't, no, it doesn't work. Not all games are created equal and not all situations are created equal. But the SEC is the master of trying to say that, no, everything that we do is better so that our mistakes shouldn't count as much as your mistakes.
Our losses are different than your losses. Yeah. All right. Well, and I get it, Craig. You're exactly right. It's just kind of
what are media days?
Yeah.
They're propaganda, basically. They're your platform to politic and get in all the opinions on the major issues and to float the future of your conference and talk about how great that's going to be. And if you're Greg Sankey, take multiple shots at Florida State as he took another one today. If you want to take it that way, even though I still don't believe a single word that he's saying, and he's saying what he has to say right now. But yeah, it's their time under the sun. Brett Yormark, was tooting his own horn last week. Yeah. So this is what media days are. I just think that the constant we deserve more, and it's like, all right, we're getting to the point now where like 6 or 7 of y'all are starting to want to take credit, and 4 of y'all really deserve it. So, the moment I start to hear South Carolina demanding playoff access, I'm going to just lose my mind on this show because, you still need to prove it. And even though there has been a 20-year reign, that doesn't mean that LSU just deserves automatically to be a fifth team in versus, the second-best team from another conference. But that's what they're already, positioning for. And we knew that when there was going to be an expanded playoff. There's been talk the entire time about, that the SEC is going to get 5 and the Big Ten is going to get 5. And so how much does that leave everybody, and we've already heard that, can the Big 12 get 2 teams in is a constant topic on this show. That's an actual topic. And the Big 12, their only argument is really, we have to go and win. Whereas with the SEC, they're getting at least 4. Somehow they'll probably get 5, and if they can, they're going to jockey to try and tell you how their 3-loss, 6th-place team deserves it over a 1 or 2-loss team from the ACC. So just prepare yourselves for all of that moving forward.
I'm ready for it. The bubble that I talk about when it comes to the top 25 is going to be even more of a bubble for the college football playoff 12. Sankey, this is from Go Black 45. Sankey gets a lot of heat mainly because he's talking to the media constantly like Brett Yormark. Tony Petitti barely talks at all. And Phillips always manages to say the wrong thing when he does talk.
Well, I think Petitti is smart. He just lays in the weeds and speaks when he needs to, and he lets Sankey take a lot of the heat, honestly, because he's just not out there to be poked at. He's not out there saying things. So, and if he is, it's just not being picked up and ran with like a Greg Sankey or a Brett Yormark or even a Jim Phillips at this point. So, yeah, that's something the Big Ten's kind of done this entire time, if you think about it. Even Oregon-Washington last year, we didn't hear much about that, like from a commissioner standpoint. You heard, the Big Ten will never take so-and-so. They don't want that. But you didn't hear him out there a lot. You heard Kleofkoff often enough to know, I think he's kind of full of it, and I don't know if he's right about that. You heard Yormark banging on every locker imaginable to make as much noise as possible, but the Big Ten just kind of sat back and let things happen and didn't try to be too much of a disruptor, even though they were clearly pulling some strings behind the scenes. So they definitely have a different approach. It worked for them. They got Oregon, they got Washington, they got UCLA, they got USC. Oh, yeah, they're way better off.
They cleaned up.
And they're not being looked at as like the big bad villain in the room, and they're the ones that just won the national title. we have to remind ourselves of that fact. But, and then on the ACC side, I mean, I think it's kind of like I'm very interested next week with Media Days because it almost feels like, is that George Kliavkoff up there talking about the strength of his conference and the strength of their future and these things, knowing full well that behind the scenes it's a little bit more chaotic? We'll find that out in the coming days, but there's definitely different approaches from different commissioners, that's for sure.
You'll enjoy the top 5 today then, Craig, because I kind of cover that. But, yeah, I mean, I think this – Jim Phillips was the right commissioner then, following up John Swofford in the ACC. He's clearly not the right guy now.
Why?
Because he's the old, like, Greg Sankey adapted to the times. He was always a shark. Like, he was always going to keep swimming forward and keep eating, right? That's what Greg Sankey does. He's just going to go keep swimming forward and keep eating. And that's a compliment. I'm saying he's going this way. Jim Phillips is a dolphin, man. He's out there kind of swimming around
Dolphins can kill sharks.
Okay, maybe a bad example. He's something else.
Just letting you know that.
Yeah, he's something else.
Yeah, Dolphins
he's
like
just
Rambo.
not like he is. For example, he's a lot like Bob Bowlesby. Is where Bob Bowlesby is a conference commissioner who belonged in a certain time in college athletics. And then when that time changed, he got out. Jim Phillips, that time has changed, and he's still trying to rope it in and make it how it used to be, and it's just not that.
I think he's trying to, before he leaves, hopefully be able to keep that conference steady.
Yeah,
and walk away maybe. I would think he'd want to walk away.
But he's done nothing to. And there's not a lot that they can do.
I was going to say, what's he supposed to do? Like,
yeah,
I mean, he's sitting there and he's going about his business, and there's just one petulant child that is just not stopping screaming, and then they're getting their little brother riled up or whatever. Like, Clemson's barking too. They're being much different in their approach about it and not nearly as loud. Whereas Florida State is like, they're making it known that they're unhappy.
Make sure you watch our Regents meeting.
Yeah, but it's like, what is he supposed to do about that? All right, you guys go. We'll lose hundreds of millions of dollars and part of our cachet, but just so long as you stop, like, what's he supposed to do? So he's got to do what he can. I just think he's in a very unenviable position where clearly there's like a hole on both sides of the boat, and it's like, how can we plug this, and can we plug it, and is it a permanent fix? And I think they're trying to figure that out.
Next week will be
mostly in the courts, and and that's what I said. Next week will be very interesting because you had Yormark go on his push. He got it all started. He got all the realignment stuff ramped back up. He got the waters churned for the ACC and even the SEC. Like, how much are they talking about realignment at those media days this week? Over all 4 days, they've been talking about realignment. Greg Sankey commenting on it. So Brett churned the waters and got this all kind of sparked back up. The Big Ten next week, like, they'll probably just take the high road and not say much, if at all, about it, or they'll be very vague.
There might be an occasional thought if someone brings up whether or not they would be interested in expanding because of the Florida.
But they're not going to pour gas on it. They're going to be like, they're going to have their prepared statement. And then with the ACC, like, that's a total crapshoot. Like, how do you approach it if you're Jim Phillips? You'll preach stability, but everybody's going to be side-eyeing everything you say, much like George Kliavkoff a year ago.
Go Black 45 again. Good point. He goes, listen, Sankey's job is to put the SEC on the best position to be profitable, and also his job is not to make others feel better. I just had my screen go black for a second, or feel good, and he does that. He is in an all 100% power move, and he can say pretty much whatever he wants, and his conference has backed him up, and there's evidence.
And I guess that must be a comment towards the chat, because I don't think we're saying anything otherwise. I mean, he's doing his job. Like, we don't necessarily love the propaganda, but we understand the propaganda, and I don't fault him or anybody. I don't like it when the media does it that don't need to be doing it to the extent that they do it, and that's like just select, like, here and there. You can get a little overboard. It's like, you're not on the team, pal. Like, you can, like, cool off on the love fest a little bit, but for the guy who's running the league, your job is to be the biggest, baddest, strongest, fastest, best in the land, and you've been that, and all the things are breaking the way for you to continue to be that. There's a other league that's similar, but other than that, like, arguably, you're still ahead of them in most cases, And the ones you're not really all that worried about it, I don't think, because you're in a really good spot wherever you look, and you're certainly one of the top 2, if not the top 1. And so, yeah, what he's done, what his predecessors have done, and what they've got coming up, only reinforces that. So he's doing what's best for them, and I don't fault him at all.
Funny thing is, this is according to Bracket Cat, that Yormark really never said anything. He just had leaks sent to the media guys.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things that flared up early, and then, of course, we had him on live, and it was really, really good.
That's true, and that's very fair, and I should probably comment on that, because all he said, and this is what was kind of driving us mad for like the last 6 months, of when like you'd hear all this, it's happening, and it's like, what is? And this is all, it's all, and it's like, that just sounds like a lot of noise, and it sounds like a lot of killing off season time, honestly, to be very clear. So we didn't partake in a whole lot of that. There's obviously some legs to some things that could possibly happen, but Brett Yormark knows at this point, if he did anything intentionally, he knows how people take, we're open for business. And I have said how many times on this show, that doesn't just mean realignment. That means having the beef jerky sponsorship. That means having the media days, having a promotional partner. That means all those types of things. But he knows at this point, when he says we're open for business, and he clarified it with us at the very beginning of our interview and said, like, that's not what it's all about.
That's exactly right.
He even said that's not what it's all about, but he knows that's how it's taken. So when he says that, there are people that are very eager and keen to talk realignment because realignment's popular or it's their favorite subject or whatever. So when they hear that, they don't want to hear that it's possibly about something else. It's about realignment, and then the rumors get all swirled up, and you see what the last few days have brought. So, yeah, you're right. That shouldn't necessarily be on Yormark, but I think he is mindful of, like, when he speaks and he says that particular phrase, there's a group of people that hear that, and they don't hear anything else but it's realignment, and they run with it, and then you turn into what we've seen the last few days of a little substance is thrown on it from a Brett McMurphy, and then the internet goes crazy for it, and here we are.
I wish that when it comes to realignment and those who are on Twitter that discuss it, and I rarely do get into it. Now, we got into it quite a bit after the UT and Texas-Oklahoma story and felt really good about it, but you almost wish there was a rating of what would it be called?
Accuracy?
A rating of accuracy, because I think you'd have about 5 to 7. And some of them, again, if you throw enough out there, some of it might eventually be true. But I wish there was an accuracy barometer. That's what I'm thinking about.
I would think that would be great.
On some Twitter handles that just, like, for example, you don't hear from them for 5 or 6 months, and you don't even follow them, but because others might. And the next thing you know, it's like they're on crack.
Well, like MH Fur, the West Virginia guy, he just pops in as soon as things start to get heated up, and I believe I've read some things that are accurate. I think I've seen some things that are suddenly like, don't remember that one, like just fly on by that, or details change. But like to your point, not singling out, but I think that's somebody that everybody sees pop up during realignment is the West Virginia guy.
Yeah, and
they believe everything. But to your point, what is the real accuracy rating? Because this I do know, and I'm not saying him, but definitely there are people with burner accounts that will then go back themselves up through the burner. No, he's been accurate this entire time, and it's like, that's you talking about you. Like I have proof that that's happened with an account or two. Okay. Not him.
All right.
Not him.
Well, they have to go to sleep.
But there's a lot. They clearly don't care. But there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And so you're like, well, see, this person's saying that they're right. And it's like, well, that's because it's the same person on their burner account backing up their accuracy. So I would love an accuracy meter on the, like, who's 75% hitting?
75, not nearly.
No, I know.
It needs to be 99%.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, that would be nice to have, like, a bar next to their name of yellow to green shading of, like, how accurate have they been?
Okay, I'll kitchen sink a lot of things in this room. Smokey can fly. Garrett is a tap dancer. Craig's a drag queen. Emery's from Oklahoma. 3 or 4 of those things are wrong. Emery is from Oklahoma. So when Emery's like, I am from Oklahoma, I'd be like, I told you. Everything I say is right.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that.
I mean, that's what's going on here.
So wait a minute, let's go back to Garrett and a drag queen.
No, Garrett's a tap dancer. Craig was.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know what he does when he comes out of here. I might have nailed that one. But
we really don't.
No.
So here is Sam Pittman. The story yesterday, one of the things that Steve Sarkisian said when Texas was on the clock is about how Arkansas, he thinks that people in Arkansas hate Texas more than they like themselves. And Sam Pittman was asked that And his response, he's probably right.
I like that.
Yeah,
I
he's probably
that.
right. I think the last time they played was in 2021, and I'm not sure if that was Sarkisian's first year, but Arkansas beat them up pretty good, like 40-16 or something like that. They've beaten Texas over the years, haven't been very good of late, but that's it. And it's one thing I love about the SEC with Texas and OU joining that conference. There's like 3 or 4 rivalries that have been kick-started with Texas and A&M. Oklahoma, Missouri is one. I mean, it's a pretty good rivalry back in the day. Arkansas, Texas, that's a great rivalry.
I mean, OU Arkansas has not really been, but they're
amazing.
right next to each other.
They don't play each other a lot.
But now they will.
They had that crazy Orange Bowl game,
right.
and Arkansas stunned the world.
But they're literally neighbors.
Yes.
And so now they're in the league together, and so you could see that maybe as a newer one that adds some substance because it is so close to home. So that's one that you don't even consider, but that's a possibility of them being Texas, LSU, like A&M with LSU. That wasn't one, but now it sort of kind of is. And so there will also be new rivalries that spark. So, I could see Oklahoma, Arkansas. Yeah. But the Texas-Arkansas one, I do want to say one final comment. You're absolutely right as far as the accuracy bar, because if you say every possibility, you're bound to be right at some point and then say you're right. I just wanted to say.
Oh, yeah. If you hit it one time and it's a big story.
You missed 90 of them, but you got that one.
That. There's a writer here in the state that, absolutely kicked ass on some things that were going on. And then kind of everyone leaned on him for a little while, and he wasn't as accurate. But he hit the lottery on the first one.
I think.
And he's a good dude. He's really good at what he does.
Here's what I think what happened with him. He had a great source that then started, when the narrative changed, started using him because he knew people would believe him because he fed him the right information.
Yeah.
Then he wound up.
And it was a Big 12 deal.
Yeah, it was a Big 12 deal. But, I think.
We have a guest coming up.
Yeah, with Texas and Arkansas needs to get good again, and that'll make that rivalry where people remember it. But really, since they left the Southwest Conference, I mean, it's killed it, and they've never both been really good at the same.
First or second year, he won 10 games, Craig.
But they've not been really good at the same time. Arkansas and Texas.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also they just don't play a whole lot. That's mostly it because they have played twice since 2010. I think I had it. They played in 2008, and Mac Brown beat Bobby Petrino, and then they didn't play again until 2014. And Arkansas, Brett Bielema beat Charlie Strong 31-7 in 2014. And then the most recent, 2021, Arkansas, Sam Pittman beat the mess out of Sarkisian and company 40-21. So Arkansas has won the last 2, and those last 2 have occurred in the last 15 years. Yeah, so they just haven't played all that much.
When did Matt Jones play quarterback at Arkansas?
It was the early 2000s.
Okay, because I remember one year they just humiliated them, beat them up pretty good, beat Texas up pretty good. But what you'll see is that the history, because Texas has been good for so long, despite a couple of gaps, is they still have a huge winning record, huge edge, almost 2-1 on teams that are like A&M and Arkansas, because they beat everybody for a long time, year after year after year after year.
Yeah, the Oklahoma gap is closing.
Oh, big time.
That one used to be a lot larger, and Oklahoma has the advantage in a lot of the other categories like Natties and Heisman and those types of things. But the head-to-head gap's closed. It's still 10 in favor of Texas, I think, in the win column.
I think it's less than that. I looked at it the other day.
Okay, well, it was around 10 the last time I looked in the last couple of years, and so it's starting to get closer, and that's one that could, in theory, look up in 10, 15 years and be interesting to see how close that one is. But for the most part, if you look at that one in particular, there's a big blob of burnt orange, in the very first 2 or 3 decades of that rivalry, where they built up an insane advantage, and I think that's probably what you're referring to is those early days. In a lot of these rivalry cases, they built up a little bit of a lead.
It is a big lead. It's 63, 51, and 5, but it used to be 25.
Yeah, it used to be a lot more than that.
All right, when we come back, Zach Barnett.